All right. My name is Tim, and I'm joined today with Patrick. He's going to be helping making sure this presentation goes smoothly. So today we're going to be learning about how to collaborate with GitHub. I would like to thank MLH for providing the slides and also sponsoring this event. So if you want to see what they're up to, check out the @MLHacks Twitter handle right there. And if you want to post about the event, the hashtag is right there. So a little bit about me. I'm a junior at Virginia Tech, and I'm studying computer science. My favorite programming language is C. It's basically like Java without the garbage collection. So you have more freedom over your code, and thus it's more low level. But computer science is pretty fun. Here's a little bit more about MLH. And if you want to follow along with the code and the slides, I recommend you open up this link, and it will tell you to fill in the fields, and in boxes 5 and 6, it'll tell you which to put in. So I'll wait for a few minutes for you guys to get the slides and the code. Just type in ready if you guys want to continue on with the slides.
And if either of you guys are having trouble with the link, let us know and we can help you out.
Yep. All right. So what will you learn today? Well, here's the gist of it. So we're learning about the basics of Git and GitHub, the GitHub workflow, and if we have time, we'll learn about the command line Git usage. So here's what you'll be building. You're going to edit a file on GitHub, which allows this website to update with the location of your hometown. It's pretty cool. And we're going to use GitHub to do that. And how will you build it? Well, first, you have to have an account on GitHub. You want to fork the repository that contains the source code for the website you just looked at. Then you'll add your hometown and make a pull request. You'll comment on someone else's pull request. And the fifth one we won't be able to do because I do not own the repository. And the sixth one, you'll be able to refresh the main website to see the people being added. Now that you've seen the steps for GitHub, let's get started. But first of all, we're going to talk about collaborating on a project together. And how do we do this? Version control, of course. So you'll often hear about Git and GitHub, and there is a difference between them. Git is the version control system. It can be used with many tools or locally on your computer to help you keep track of changes in your code projects. It's like Google Docs for code, but better. GitHub uses Git for version control and provides you with many different collaboration tools as well. And it's also a platform for co-collaboration. There's also a subsection of GitHub called GitLab that if you're in CS, you would also probably use. So you might ask, why should we use version control? Well, to put it simply, emailing a file is very painful. Let's say you're working on a project and the way you collaborate with code is through email. Well, first you send the email, wait until your partner or teammates send you the code through the email, and then you would look at the email and see what changes need to be made. Then you send back the email, and overall it's just a big hassle. It's just very time consuming compared to just regular version control. What are the features of version control? Well, you're able to log changes in a searchable way instead of renaming a file for each version. And collaborators can work in parallel and measure changes automatically instead of manually comparing the differences between a file. So in other words, you can work together on the same code file without having to email back and forth. So if you haven't already done so, you should make a GitHub account. If you're a student, you should use the left link, and if you're not, you should use the right link. I'll take a few minutes for you guys to set that up if you haven't already. Just let me know if you want to continue by saying ready again. And I'll help you out with any issues you may have. Just so I know the demographic, I'd like to know what level is your education, guys? Nice. Virginia Tech, right? Or nice.
But yeah, you guys don't have to use the chat if you'd like to. You're more than welcome to take your cameras on if you feel comfortable doing so and just respond, I guess, with the microphone. No big deal either way. Whatever is more comfortable for you.
Yeah, feel free to use your mics if it's more easier to use. CMDA. What about you, Peter? Right, I'll give it a couple more minutes before we move on. Oh yeah, how do you guys hear about VTHacks? Was it through a friend or through an announcement?
I'm friends with Peter's girlfriend.
I see.
Yeah, I heard about it through the listserv. I actually didn't know it was this weekend, so kind of hopped on last minute, but excited.
We're excited to have you on board, Phan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've used GitHub before, but I feel like there's so much I don't know, so I thought this information session kind of help out.
Yeah, hopefully I can teach you how to use GitHub, at least the very basics of it.
Yeah, excited. I did sign up for the education account. I put in my transcript, but I said it might take up to 25 days, so I think I should be okay with just the regular.
All right, that's fine then. All right. How's it coming along, Jax?
I'm all good. I've got mine all set up. I've had GitHub account for a little while, so I'm all good.
All right, that's nice. That's nice. All right, I'll move on then. All right, so as you notice, when you get on the GitHub page, there's a few tabs that you can see right away. First is the pull request tab, which shows your own pull requests against other people's repositories. And a pull request is basically to ask to make changes to someone else's code by submitting your own changes for the review. It doesn't do it automatically. You have to approve the pull request. Next to pull request is issues, which allows you to comment on someone else's code without actually submitting your own solution. So think of it as like commenting instead of just submitting your own code to upload. And in the upper right corner, you can create your own projects and see any notifications received. That's pretty self-explanatory. And clicking on your profile allows you to change your settings, which there are a lot. One of them is the SSH one, which is an entirely different topic, but you know. So now we're going to explore a repository. So I want you to navigate to this GitHub link. And you might have heard me saying repository for most of the lecture or most of the presentation. Repository is basically like a project folder where the code is stored. All right. So now that you open the link, there's several different tabs that you might want to check out. In the first tab is the repository. The first tab in a repository is the code tab, and it shows the code in the project. So it shows all the different files that are in the repository. The second tab is the issues tab. It's similar to the issues tab on the main page. And if there's a problem with the code in someone's project, you can open an issue and let them know about it. And if you want to, you should always try to follow the project maintainer's instructions for opening an issue, since they might not want to be spammed with small changes. And the pull request tab is similar to the pull request tab on the home page. If you want to contribute code to someone else's repository, you open up a pull request. And that's what you'll be doing right now. And, well, before we get to that, there's a lot of terminology that we need to go over before talking about all of this. So in the developer workflow, there's a few different steps that people usually like to adhere to. So first, you want to fork someone else's code, which means creating your own copy of their repository. Then you want to create a branch, which is basically a parallel version of your own copy, where you'll test your own changes. So making a branch allows you to edit code without actually accidentally breaking the working version. Next, you want to stage your changes as you go. When you're happy with them, you'll commit them. And staging is adding to a cohesive group or bundle of revisions, and committed is a group of revisions you want to officially add to your branch. If you want to add your own code to someone else's project, you'll open a pull request typically. If they approve it, they'll merge your branch into the master branch. And merging means to officially add the changes from your branch into the master branch or another branch. It doesn't have to be the master branch. All right, that's all the terminology that I'm gonna talk about. So I'll show you how to work with GitHub mainly. There are many ways to use GitHub. So we're just gonna do a very simple and common developer workflow that one might follow. First, you wanna fork the repository. And this is only necessary if you're not a collaborator on the project. Oh, let me know if I'm going too fast so I can slow down. Next, you want to create a branch. You should typically name your branch something meaningful, like, for example, you're creating a branch on master and you want to have a certain stage to work all the code. I would call that maybe version 1.0 or 0. Some number. But Usually you want to follow the conventions set by your team. All right, once you've created a branch, open up the locations.txt. Let me know if you encounter any issues. All right, next you click the edit icon, which looks like a pencil. Then you want to add the name of your hometown. Choose a random blank line. It doesn't have to be your full address. It's just the town or city where you're from. And then at the bottom, you want to commit the changes. Usually you want to add a descriptive message so contributors of the project know what specifically is changed about their code. And then once you're done with that, you want to commit the changes. All right, now go back to the main page of your repository and then select pull request. And since it's a simple pull request, you can just create the pull request. However, if you were working on a bigger open source project, you would want to be pretty descriptive about the changes you made, so as to not encounter any program breaking bugs. All right, then I'm going to have you comment on someone else's pull request. So you should see everyone doing their pull requests. I want you to comment on that and then submit it. All right. So this is what a pull request would look like if someone who has write access to a repository. I unfortunately do not have write access, but this is what it would look like. They would click merge pull request and it would merge with the master branch or whichever branch you're merging to, and your hometown would be added. However, if the file has multiple edits, it could be unclear which change should be committed. Thus, this is a conflict and must be resolved before merging. And this is often an issue a lot of people encounter when using Git and GitHub. On GitHub, a conflict is marked by this following text, new branch changes, and then the equal signs, the original, and then the original branch. And then to resolve the conflict, you edit the file to however you want it to be. You mark it resolved, and then you merge it. So right now it is showing how one would resolve a merge conflict. All right. Well, once you've committed your changes, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't use that terminology since that might be a little bit confusing. Once you finish your changes, you should refresh the original web page and then wait for the people's hometowns to be added. but it might not update as fast as it might want to because it can take a few minutes for it to auto deploy. But it might also already be added, so it would be kind of redundant. All right, so that was GitHub. Now we're going to move on to using GitHub on the command line, which is honestly my preferred method and many other students' preferred method to use the command line instead of using the actual GitHub website. So once you start working on projects that are more complex, you might find that you prefer using your own local coding environment, like your own IDE. Could be Visual Studio, IntelliJ, PyCharm. You might want to use that over GitHub. So let's learn how to set that up. We'll also learn how our local environment works with our repositories on GitHub. If you haven't installed Git, or if you know you've installed Git, make sure you use Git version or Git --version on your shell, whether it be terminal, PowerShell, just any terminal application. But if you don't have it installed, we can walk through that.
I have mine installed. I think I recently updated Homebrew and got Git running, so good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
What about Peter and Z? All right. I'm guessing you guys already have Git installed, so I will skip the next few slides because that details on installing Git. All right, now you want to configure Git. So we want to configure your local environment so that the correct GitHub account is associated with your commits. On GitHub, find your username in the top corner. Then you can click on your avatar in the upper right hand. It will say signed in as whatever your username is. Then you want to return to your command line. So make sure you have that open first. And then replace your username or replace mlh-localhost with your username. So namely, you just want to use the git config --global user.name and then replace the mlh localhost in the command with whatever your username that you found on your GitHub is. And then once you set your username, you want to set your email address as well. So it's the same process, except instead of user.name, it would be user.email and your own email that you use for GitHub. I'll keep it on for a few more seconds before I move on to the next slide. All right. You can double check that it's set using git config user.name and user.email in case it's not the right one. and then you can change it. All right, now we're getting into the commands. These are going to be very important when it comes to working with Git on your command line. If you forget these commands, I believe you can search up GitHub cheat sheet, and it'll give you the commands in case you ever forget them. All right, so moving on to the individual workflow. There's a few additional steps compared to using GitHub. So here are the steps. First, you clone any repository you have access to using git clone. Cloning is just copying a repository to your computer. Then you create a branch, like in GitHub, with git branch, and then the name of the branch. And then after you make those changes, you use git add to stage your changes, which means to save your changes so that they are ready to be added to your branch. You'll use git commit -m, and then -m is just basically to type up a message that explains your changes, and it then adds your changes to the branch. And then when you're ready to push your local changes to your repository on GitHub, you use git push. So yeah, like I said, -m is the flag for message, which means you type in the message in between the quotes to state what your changes are. And pushing means just adding the changes on your computer to your GitHub repository. So to reiterate, the steps are cloning, creating a branch, staging your changes, committing your changes with your message, and then pushing your changes. And then after that, you can make a pull request and have your pull request merge on GitHub like before. Then you can pull changes from GitHub to your local repository. And pulling just means getting the changes from GitHub down to your local copy. So it might be a little bit confusing. So here's a visual representation of what that might look like. So here are the three main phases of Git. It's like a work desk. The working directory is where the writing happens. This is where you're coding and saving your work. So basically your local directory that you're working in. Then you have your staging area, then you have your repository. When you're happy with your commits, you commit them to the repository. These are like the final drafts, stored more permanently in a drawer. And then in the staging area, when you're happy with the, okay. Let's start from the beginning, my bad. So first, you start from the working directory, which is where you're writing in your local directory, like on your IDE, which could be Eclipse, Visual Studio. Then you have your staging area. When you're happy with your group of changes on the local directory, you use git add, and then you're staging your changes. They're called commits, and they're like rough drafts stored in a bundle. And then the repository is the final stage, is when you're happy with your commits, you commit them to the repository. And thus they're like more final drafts stored more permanently in a drawer. And here's another visual representation of what that might look like. So first, we have the working directory, which is your workspace, local on your machine, which is the bottom level. And then once you want to add your changes, you do git add, moving on to the next level, which is your staging area, which is basically your rough draft. And then when you're ready to submit your rough draft, you do git commit into the repository, which is like the final draft and is permanent. All right, let's try it. So let's create a new repository on GitHub and work with it locally. From your profile, or homepage on GitHub, click New. And then it tells you to create a new repository. You can name it whatever you want. In this specific example, they chose Hello World, but usually it's something you want it to be descriptive that describes the project. And then you type up a description for your repository. And then you want to initialize this repository with a README. So you can alter that so people know what your project is about in the readme.txt. And once you finish creating your repository, or if this were a code project, you would usually add a .git ignore or a license, but you don't need to. All right, and then you create the repository. And then you'll be redirected to the homepage of your new repository. It's pretty neat. To start working on the command line for your GitHub, you want to clone or download you want to clone using the URL they give you of your repository. So, and I believe it's in the top right in the green button. There's a clone with HTTPS, and then you click the clipboard button to copy the address of your repository. In the command line, you would want to use git clone, and then you paste the URL that you have to clone the repository. And this is what the output might look like. Once you're done cloning your repository, you can explore your repository. So it's important to note that you did not simply download the code. You cloned a Git repository. The Git repository comes with a special folder called .git, but you don't really need to know a lot about this folder. It just connects your local project to the project on GitHub. So it's sort of like a link. All right, let's start making changes to our clone repository and then pushing them to the GitHub. So first, you want to change the directory into the repository you cloned by typing the command below. And well, you would replace the hello world with the name of your repository. So it would be change directory and the name of your repository. So now we're going to make some changes. You don't want to commit directly to master. So you should always make a new branch unless you want to merge the current branch to master. So to create a new branch, use git checkout with the -b tag and then the name of your branch. And once you've done that, you want to open up the project folder in the code editor of your choice. So it could be IntelliJ, Visual Studio, Eclipse, whichever IDE you use. Or you could use Atom to open the project, but you don't have to.
Tim, could you go back to the checkout tab real quick?
Sure.
So for the update README, would that just be the README file that you create within the Git, or the name of?
So, sorry if I didn't explain this correctly.
No worries.
The in between the quotation marks is the name of the branch that you're making. So, like with GitHub, you're creating a new branch with your own changes, right? So this command allows you to create a branch with the name update-readme. So it doesn't necessarily have to update your README. It could be something like adding new stuff, or change 1, change 2, version 0.09. Just some examples of names of your branch that it could be.
Do you have to be in the same directory as the repo gitme, or is it just from your local host?
I believe you would have to be in the same repository of your, wherever you cloned your Git repository.
Yeah, I don't think the path on the left side there shows the current directory, but when you do run git checkout, you have to be within the repository itself. So if you clone the hello world repository, you have to be within that outer level folder at least at the same level as that .git file for the for Git to recognize that, hey, I'm in a repository and I'd like to make a new branch of this repository and switch to that one.
Yeah, Patrick's right on that front.
Okay, yeah, I just got it to work. I guess I was missing the dash in between the update and README, or dash between the files, so it wasn't changing, but I got it to work.
Okay.
Thank
Was
you,
it
guys.
the -b tag, maybe?
It was so I had git checkout -b and then parentheses new update, and then there was no dash between new and update, and it was returning fatal new branch is not a valid branch name. And then once I did add a dash between new and branch, still within the parentheses, then it switched to the new README file.
That's interesting.
I guess you can't have spaces like in the branch names.
Yeah.
You can't have, there's no spaces in a branch name, I'm pretty sure. As far as at least that's like either it's like standard practice, or just kind of that's the convention is you don't have any spaces, because it can get weird when you're parsing commands if there's a space.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, usually to denote spaces, people would use underscore or dash. But anyways. So make any changes you want to your README and then save them. So yeah, just use your code editor to add something to README, and it'll save the change on your local repository for now. And then you want to return your command line. You want to type this command below the git status, which tells you that you've modified the readme.md file. And then at the bottom, it tells you that you have not added any changes to commit. So we'll do that once everyone is ready to do that, or after everyone's finished doing their readme edits. Okay, to add any changes that you want to commit, you would type in git add and then the name of the files that you want to commit. So in this case, you would want to add the file readme.md. But let's say you wanted to add a folder to the repository. You would just do the path of that rather than the file name. Or let's say, for example, you want to do certain files in a folder. You would do git add and then the name of all the different files. So it would be like git add file1 dot c, file2 dot c, file3 dot c, and etc. So that allows you to add only certain files rather than the entire folder or a single file.
Is that separated by spaces or commas or?
It's separated by spaces, which is why
Okay.
you don't want to have any spaces when creating your branch name.
Gotcha.
So if you type in git status again, you can see that the changes you made to read.md are ready to be committed. Or hopefully. Usually when you commit changes, you want to include a commit message just so you can inform your team members of what changes you made. So it should be descriptive of your changes. It's also standard practice to put the message first commit for your first commit. And like I said before, it's git commit -m, which allows you to type in the message and then in quotation marks, the message you want to send. Now you want to push the changes back up to GitHub. To do this, you would do git push, and then Git will tell you the correct command to do that. Since this is your first commit, they tell you to use this command, git push -- set upstream origin, and then the name of whatever branch you called it. So doing git push will not work until you set your upstream to the branch that you want to have. And then after that, you can just use git push once you've set the upstream, rather than just this entire command. You'll notice that you need to enter your GitHub username and password. So make sure you enter those credentials. The password will not show what you're typing, so you want to get it right on the first time, otherwise it'll prompt you to do it again. I believe later on in the slides, it shows how to do that without asking for username and password. Now you'll see this output, hopefully. And then now you can create a pull request in the browser like you did before by going to the URL provided. So the URL would be the name of your repository that you're working in. Then you would click compare and pull request onto, which is in this area above create new file, upload files, etc. You would see that you've pushed your changes. And then now you would name your pull requests appropriately after clicking on create pull request. And since you already own the repository, you can just merge your own pull request. Now you want to make sure that your local master branch matches the master branch on GitHub. So in order to go back to your master branch, you would type in git checkout and then master. If you wanted to go back to the branch you created earlier, you would just do the same command, but with the name of the other branch. And it should say that your branch is up to date with the origin/master. Then you can pull the changes on master down to your local repository with the command below, which is git pull. And then after that, you can see your changes in the browser. To summarize, Git is a version control system allowing multiple people to collaborate. GitHub adds features to Git and provides a web interface. And command line Git lets you propose changes without the web interface. If you want to do this quiz, you can type in this link to see what you've learned for the workshop. Now, the next steps are to change Git or configure Git with credentials so you don't have to enter your password every time you're pushing your code. And then using git stash to move changes between branches. And here's just more information about, if you want more information about this, you should check your email for access to the slides, practice problems, deeper dives into other key topics, instructions to join the MLH community, and more opportunities for MLH. And that's the end of the workshop.
That was brilliant. Thank you guys. So a lot. I definitely see myself using this a lot more often nowadays.
No problem. You have any questions?
I think I got the first commit and the pull to work, so kind of was caught up with the video and everything you were doing by the end. Good to go.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I definitely recommend setting up the username and password so you don't have to do that every time you're
Yeah, I forgot my password, and for like 5 minutes while you were moving on, I was like, oh my god, what's my GitHub password?
Yeah, I think for that you would set up an SSH key if you know what it is.
Okay, SSH.
Yeah, if you want more information about that, it's git SSH.
All set. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'll stay up to date with all the email and that you're sending at the end, and the quiz too. I think. Go ahead and do that as well. But I hope you guys have a great rest of the hackathon. Everything goes well.
Thank you. You too. Make sure you attend all the events too and other workshops.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna try to be at all of them. Like they've been so informative so far.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us or to anybody else on the team with any questions you might have, whether it's about this or if you need help with something you're working on.
Yeah. Awesome. Happy hacking.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
See ya.
Cool.
Cool.
Our numbers steadily increased.
Yeah. I guess everyone was just doing something else in the meantime.
Well, I talked to Brian, and it looks like